3 months ago, I decided to quit my six-figure tech job and completely walk away from my career in GovTech for good. I had a pretty successful career in GovTech. If you don't know what that is, it's basically just IT working in the government sector. It's like government contracting. And on paper, everything looked really good. I worked really hard to progress throughout my career, getting promoted, getting into leadership roles, and, increasing my income each step of the way. And, I had a stable job, you know, great pay, good benefits, and everything looked good. I was able to work towards, owning, buying a home. I was able to start saving and investing for retirement because am a late starter when it came to saving and investing in retirement, which was important for me to get on the ball and do, which is one of the reasons why I focused on earning the highest income that I could throughout my career so that I could play catch up, because I definitely felt behind. And I started my tech career pretty late. I didn't start, my career in tech until my mid 30s. So I had a lot of catching up to do. And something that I ignored from the very beginning is that I knew that that type of work was not what I wanted to be doing. So I was misaligned with that, type of work from the beginning. I ignored what I knew because it was a clearly defined path that was simple for me to follow, is easy for me to get into because it just made the most sense given my military career prior to me getting into tech. And it was a clear path for me to follow, and it had a very high earning potential. So it made the most sense to do it, despite me knowing that I really didn't want to continue on with, government related work because I just was, pretty much done with the environment, that type of environment, that type of culture, the mindset. A lot of, even though it was more of a corporate structure outside of the military, it still was wrapped in that whole military kind of environment and way of doing things. And I, didn't really want to jump right back into that after spending almost a decade in the Army, but I did anyway because it was just, it was prestigious. Honestly, it looked really good on paper. And I didn't own a home. I just felt really late to the game, and I felt very behind because you were fed that this blueprint of success, that you have to get the degrees, you get the high paying career, buy the house, the car, have the family, all of that, right? That once you achieve all those things, you are successful in life. And I didn't have any of those things at the time. So I felt so behind, and I was playing catch up to a timeline that wasn't even real, right? So in any event, I worked my butt off. I did all the things. I achieved all the milestones. I got the education. I got my master's degree. I ended up getting a lot of very high level certifications to support my career and me advancing in my career. I ended up buying a house, but ultimately ended up selling it because that's not all it's cracked up to be either. But I was doing all of these things and achieving all of these milestones and still feeling like it wasn't enough because I never felt happy about it. Like, I never felt fulfilled. I never felt like I finally made it. It always felt like I was still just on this hamster wheel, just trying to get to the next level, the next level. And it just seemed like it was just a never ending journey. And once I made it to the 6 figure mark and stopped and just took an audit of my life and just realizing what they said that this was it. And is this it? Because I don't feel like I'm successful. The cost of living is so high. I'm living in a high cost of living area. You know, Thankfully, I know how to live below my means to mitigate that, but it just seems like I'm just going to always have to constantly be striving for the next level just to keep this level of success going. And it just became exhausting, and I ended up hitting burnout twice throughout my career. The first time wasn't as severe, it ended up really just showing up as frustration with my work, more so than anything. I was exhausted, but I just felt like, it was because I was working so hard and I could justify it. It was like, well, okay, you've been, busting your butt, trying to get these certifications and, get promoted and, so yeah, you should be tired, but hey, that's a part of hustle. That's a part of life, right? That's what happens when you're hustling to try to be successful. And I just chalked it up to that. But that was really my first sign, because I was extremely exhausted mentally and physically. And I was just really disconnected with what I was doing. And I just never felt like I had been accomplishing anything, and my work it just wasn't fulfilling. But I didn't realize all of that then, but looking back on it now, that's definitely what the issue was. But what ended up happening was I actually did take a longer than expected break from work. It ended up being a year and a half away, and but I didn't use that wasn't really strategically to recover from burnout. I just had a lot of things happening in my life during the time. Like, I ended up selling my house and moving, across the country, back home. And it was just a lot. And it ended up taking a lot longer than I anticipated. And I wasn't working during that time. So when I realized so much time had passed, I jumped right back in head first, because now I had this gap on my resume that wasn't going to look good. And I need to try to come back in at least making what I was making, if not more. And that's what I did. And I accomplished that. And so I finally made it to 6 figures and got to that 6 figure paycheck and realized it wasn't enough. So, and when I say it wasn't enough, meaning I didn't feel like I had finally hit the pinnacle of success. Like, I didn't feel like I could now rest. I just felt like I was going to always have to kind of keep going, because I'm in survival mode, to make sure that I stay employable because of the current, political climate, the current economy. Things are just hard. It's hard to get jobs, the whole nine, everything going on. And it just felt like it was just going to be never ending. And I hit a wall again with burnout, but this time it was way more severe. It actually started affecting my physical health, with chronic pain. It affected my sleep, my sleep patterns. It was affecting my mood. I was trying to take vacations and time off, but it would be fine while I was away. But then as soon as I got back to work, it was just bad all over again. I just wasn't fulfilled with the work that I was doing. And, I just didn't feel great about the work that I was doing. So I knew that I was misaligned with the job. And I resolved that I was just going to try to find another job until that was what the initial plan was, until and once I realized with the current, political climate and the way things were going, with the administration that was reelected into office, and just seeing how it was affecting, my work environment and people that I knew, that was a smack in the face that reminded me, see, this is one of the reasons why you don't need to be, in this sector anymore, because it just wasn't aligned with what I valued. And, and it never really was, honestly. So that was really the catalyst for me. So I, finished my graduate degree, I finished my master's degree, I began saving up an FU fund, which is money that you save if you become unemployed, whether voluntarily or involuntary. For me, I saved up about 6 months of expenses. I'm fortunate enough to have secondary income, which I learned how to live off of that, just in case, whenever I found myself without work. So I had a little bit of a cash cushion there. I let my lease run out and I moved back home with my mom, which is where you find me today. So, and I'm, a couple of months into my career break, prioritizing recovering from burnout and, you know, beginning to build a different path to success other than the traditional path that we've been fed, as millennials, that we should be following. And of course, for some people, it works out for them, but for some of us, it doesn't, like myself. So, what I'm focusing on now is time, location, and financial freedom, but centering the things that I value first and then building around that, building, additional income streams or a career around that. So the biggest things that I learned from this was that to value my time more, because time is the most valuable asset, because it is the one thing that we cannot get back. You can always, if you lose your job, you can always find another job or find ways to make money, especially nowadays with the internet or any other path you choose to take, but you can't get time back. And knowing that having complete control over your time is the ultimate form of wealth. Also, prioritizing, my health. You definitely, no paycheck is worth your health, whether physical or mental. And dealing with burnout, especially if you let it go on long enough, it starts to really deteriorate your health, and no job is worth that. So if you find yourself unfulfilled or misaligned with what you're doing, and it's starting to affect your health in different ways, definitely it's time to make a change. Also, listening to myself more, especially when it comes to a career, and not just pushing through. I think as millennials, we're just kind of conditioned and learn to just push through regardless of how we really feel, because we're just taught to just keep going. And that did not serve me well, because ultimately I ended up spending 8 years building a career, working to get to this point, only to walk away from it. And I've made peace with that, because I'm putting myself first for a change, instead of what looks good on paper and what society deems as successful. I'm putting me first now. So what I suggest, if any of this resonated with you, just, do an audit of your life and the things that you value, and compare it to what your lifestyle looks like now. If it doesn't match up, that's a sign, that's a sign that you definitely need to make changes for the better, for a better quality of life for you. And like I said, if any of this resonated with you, hit the subscribe button and join me on this journey to, redesigning the life that I truly want to live, in pursuit of time, location, and financial freedom. And thank you for watching my video. Take care.